So on behalf of others who aren't here and are going to watch the recording, we got Michael and Eric here in the room with me. I just want to put in a plug for this mission to Israel that I'm hoping to do with my colleague up the street, Rabbi Jesse Nagelberg, where I had the idea that I'd like to do this volunteer mission. There are these missions that have been going for the past couple of weeks to volunteer every day, to meet with people in the evening about what's going on, just to show solidarity. So I'd like to know by this coming Friday whether people are interested in it. I sent out the email that had a link to the PDF that describes the itinerary and pricing and such. There's a possibility that the pricing could be less. I have to speak to the travel agent about that tomorrow, but just put in a plug for that. So the dates would be fly on January 7th and fly home on the 1 o'clock in the morning flight on Friday from Israel to get here back on the 12th.
Did you hear back from many people?
So there are 3 people who have expressed interest, which is good. So I'd love to have 10 from the shul. That would be great. Or at least 10 altogether between the 2 shuls. That's what the pricing is based on. So anyway, we'll see. So again, think about it and take a look at the PDF and let me know if you're interested or if you have any questions about it or anything like that. Okay, so sorry for that plug during Talmud class. Let me first of all mute all.
This Talmud
And
class, fun.
yeah, Tom, right.
Well,
That's right.
plug, right?
That's a good
You
plug.
found
That's
your
right.
point to fill in.
Yeah. Right. All right. So now I'm sharing my screen, and I believe this is where we left off last time, and this is about as big as I can do it here. Okay, so where we left off last time, well, first, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. The idea of there are 2 conflicting sources. One says you can't trust non-Jews to therefore to leave your animal with them because you think or you know that what non-Jews do with animals. And there's another source that says you can buy an animal from a non-Jew and use it for a sacrifice and offer it as a sacrifice. So if non-Jews have their way with animals, then how is that okay to buy an animal from them to take as a sacrifice? How can you take something that's been defiled in that way? Shouldn't that count as a blemish that then would disqualify the animal for sacrifice? So trying to figure out this contradiction. So here we are. Rabbi Padat said, the contradiction between the Mishnah, which rules that Gentiles are suspected of bestiality, and the Braita, a source from the time of the Mishnah, but not published in the Mishnah, which permits an animal purchased from Gentiles to be sacrificed as an offering, is not difficult. So this is, that's the formal way to say, here's a solution coming to a contradiction. So Rabbi Padat says, this Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, while that Baraita is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis. So Eliezer has a stricter opinion than the rabbis. Eliezer's opinion is that you can't leave your animal with non-Jews overnight, which would then mean for Rabbi Eliezer that you can't buy animals from them for a sacrifice. Whereas the rabbis are saying you can buy animals for a sacrifice, meaning then that you should be able to leave your animal with them overnight. Okay, so it seems like the rabbis have the more lenient position than Eliezer. And so now what's the proof for this? As we learned in a Mishnah from another section dealing with the laws of the red heifer, that's para there. So the Mishnah there dealing with para is based on Numbers 19, the law for how to get purified if you come into contact with the dead, which is the highest form of impurity. And it's the easiest way to become impure, and it's the hardest way to be purified. So you need a special cow, a red-haired heifer, which is hard to find. Every now and then you'll see an article, mainly in the Israeli press, about how such a red-haired cow has been born on some kibbutz. And they're saying it's the sign that the Mashiach will come, because it's unusual to have a red-haired cow.
They can't breed them?
So, can you breed a red-haired? You might be able to breed a red-haired cow. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the law is there, whether you're allowed to do that. But there are stories about how expensive these red-haired cows are. Has to be all red, and it can't be an animal then that's been worked in any way. And then it's offered as a sacrifice, and it is burned completely to ashes on the altar, and the ashes are mixed with other things that are then sprinkled on the person who has come into contact with the dead. So the irony is that the Kohen who prepares the animal this way becomes impure, even though the mixture that he prepares purifies others.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So in the like, look at Israel, the Orthodox community. You always see the Orthodox out there. With like in October 7th, you saw the Orthodox collecting the remains.
Oh, yes.
Are they impure?
So technically, every Jewish person is impure, because we've all come into contact with the dead, whether we know it or not.
Right.
There's no purification process now for that. So there's no way. So anybody who's a Kohen today, especially in the Orthodox world, symbolically try to maintain their purity by not attending a funeral or going into a cemetery.
Don't they help prepare?
So the Kohen technically, an Orthodox Kohen would not be doing that work, or be what we have here in America is a Chevra Kadisha, preparing the Jewish body for a funeral. A Kohen would not do that. An Orthodox Kohen would not. We have a Chevra Kadisha from our synagogue, and I've allowed a Kohen to serve on that, because essentially it's just symbolic for a Kohen to maintain that purity. But again, like I said, you walk into a hospital, you become impure because you're in the same building because every hospital has a morgue. And so therefore there's somebody dead. Now, it's only Jewish dead that make a Jewish person impure, but still, the likelihood of walking into a hospital that there be a dead Jewish person there is pretty high. And if you've ever been to a cemetery, or if you've ever attended a funeral, then you're automatically impure. Right. And you don't even have to be, you don't have to touch, you just have to be under the same roof as a dead person. So that's the rule. That's why the impurity of contact with the dead, contact is very loose definition. It means being in the same airspace as a dead person. So that actually not in the same airspace, you'd be on the same ground, because in the cemetery, technically speaking, if you just stick to the paved roads in the cemetery, then a Kohen could do that. And cemeteries in Israel are built in such a way that allows for a Kohen to have access to certain parts of the cemetery, and they reserve the plots next to the road for Kohanim, so that now a Kohen's allowed to attend the funeral of anybody that you say Kaddish for. So blood relatives, a Kohen can do that, but still it would make him impure. So yeah. So this whole all the laws of ritual purity are really not done anymore, except in the Orthodox world today. The laws of what's called Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity, where a married woman once a month is supposed to, the couple are supposed to refrain from intimacy while the woman has her period, and then for that 10 days or so after that is done, that no, it's right 7 days, and then because there was a dispute in the Mishnah whether it's you have to wait a few days after until going to the mikveh. So there are Orthodox women, married women, who go to the mikveh once a month. That's the only part of ritual purity that's still around today. Everything else can't be, can't, because there's a sacrifice that goes with the purification process. And since we can't offer sacrifice since the temple's destroyed, all the other laws of purity don't apply today. Okay. So as we learned in a Mishnah, so what's the source for why the rabbis are liberal about buying an animal from a non-Jew, but Rabbi Eliezer is strict about not keeping an animal overnight with non-Jews? As we learned in a Mishnah with regard to the red heifer of purification, Rabbi Eliezer says that it may not be purchased from Gentiles, and the rabbis permit it to be purchased from Gentiles. There's actually a story probably there in that Mishnah about rabbis going to somebody in Ashkelon, I think, and willing to pay a high price from these Gentiles for their red heifer. I seem to recall a story about that. So,
Biblical times.
no, this is in in rabbis' times when the temple was still standing, when you needed to get a red heifer.
Okay.
And they heard some non-Jew in Ashkelon had a red heifer. So they went to, so I think that the thing about the story was how much they were willing to pay for it. And then the guy who they were speaking to said, I have to ask my father about this, whether I can sell it to you. And I think the father said, the father was asleep, and the non-Jew was not willing to wake his father up for it. I might be conflating two different stories there, but it's that it sets the non-Jew up in a higher status than you might expect because of the respect that the non-Jew had for his father of not wanting to wake him up.
But they're also buying the animal.
But they're buying from a non-Jew because the rabbis are saying it's okay to do that. But Rabbi Eliezer says no. And so now Rabbi Padat explains, what is it not correct to say that Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis disagree with regard to this issue? That Rabbi Eliezer holds that we are concerned that a person might have engaged in bestiality with the animal, and the rabbis hold that we're not concerned that a person engaged in bestiality with the animal? Like, how could there be disagreement about that? The Gemara rejects this conclusion. From where do you know that this is the case? Perhaps everyone agrees that we're not concerned that a person might have engaged in bestiality with the animal. And here, this is the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer. He holds, in accordance with a statement that Rabbi Yehuda says, that Rav says, as Rabbi Yehuda says, that Rav says, if one placed a bundle of sacks upon a red heifer, he has rendered it unfit for purification, as a red heifer is fit only if it has not borne any burden, in accordance with the verse upon which never came a yoke, right? So if there's a red heifer and you put a bundle on it, a bundle of sacks on it, you've disqualified now that animal to be used for the sacrifice for the purification for contact with the dead, because the animal has to be such that it never had anything on its back. And in the case of the heifer whose neck is broken, it is not rendered unfit until you pull a load with it, as the verse states, and which has not drawn in the yoke. So that heifer whose neck is broken is a different case. There are a number of places in the Torah where the required sacrifice is a heifer. So this one of the one whose neck is broken is about a corpse that's found on the side of the road, and no one can identify it, and no one comes to claim it. So what's done according to the Torah is you measure the distance of the corpse from the nearest town, and whichever town is closest to the corpse. So let's say you find a corpse between Olney and Brookville. Okay, you measure the distance. If it's closer to Brookville, then the Jews of Brookville take responsibility for the corpse. If it's closer to Olney, the Jews of Olney take responsibility for the corpse, which means that they have a sacrifice of atonement for to express sorrow for not having taken care of this person and allow this person to die in this way all alone. So a heifer is taken that has not pulled a load, so it's an unworked heifer, and its neck is broken as opposed to slaughtered, and it's broken on that spot. So the sacrifice is offered right on that spot. Okay, so the Gemara elaborates. One sage, Rabbi Eliezer, holds a red heifer purchased from a Gentile cannot be used for purification because we're concerned that it might have been used for labor. And one sage, the rabbis, holds we're not concerned that the Gentile used it for labor. Okay, so in other words, it's not about the bestiality when it comes to the red heifer that the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer are disagreeing. They're disagreeing as to whether the non-Jews knew enough not to work the heifer. But it's so that rabbis are saying, well, the non-Jews know how valuable red heifers are for the Jewish community, so maybe they would know not to work it. So accordingly, the disagreement in that Mishnah does not relate to a concern with regard to bestiality. The Gemara responds, no, it cannot enter your mind that Rabbi Eliezer prohibits purchasing a red heifer from a Gentile due to the concern that he might have placed sacks upon it, as due to the slight convenience of placing a bundle of sacks upon the heifer, the Gentile will not forfeit the potential to earn a great deal of money, which he can obtain by selling the heifer. So the Gemara counters, so too, let us say, due to the slight pleasure of engaging in bestiality with an animal, a Gentile will not forfeit a great deal of money, which he can otherwise obtain by selling the heifer. So that, in other words, if Gentiles know how much an animal is going to be worth to the Jews, then they're going to refrain from working it, and they're also going to refrain from having pleasure with it because they know they can get money for it. The Gemara responds there, with regard to bestiality, his inclination overcomes him, and he is apt to engage in bestiality with the heifer, despite the fact that he knows it's to his disadvantage to do so. So it's one thing to allow the assumption that Gentiles will not work their animal because of the potential profit that they'll get from selling it, but it's another thing to assume that the non-Jew won't be tempted by bestiality.
Is bestiality like more common? Because that was a theme last week. Is that
Yeah.
like a common theme?
I don't know. The fact that the rabbis are talking about it would make it seem like
It's a common problem.
it was a common enough that it was worth talking
Right.
about.
We talked about it a few weeks ago.
We
Now we're
did.
talking about it again.
We are, yes, it
I looked
continues
up.
with this
I looked
topic.
it up, and it it was mentioned in various legal codes of the
Right.
time that it was considered to be, a crime.
Right.
So clearly, in various cultures around the area,
Right.
It was done.
It was happening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't a crime among the Greeks, but in Hammurabi's
Mm,
code, it's a crime. So
right.
there were different approaches.
What?
Yeah.
Do you think that they call it a slight pleasure?
Uh-huh.
Is that to discourage Jews about thinking of it?
I think the rabbis understand that Jews don't do this, and so the idea is that non-Jews do. So but I would imagine that if it's since it's in the Torah, in Leviticus chapter 18, in the list of all illicit sexual relations, it includes bestiality in that list, then it was done. and therefore the Torah had to prohibit it. Now, that didn't mean that Jews didn't engage in it, because they saw what non-Jews were doing. And, it's just that different Jewish practices evolve based on where in the world Jews are from. And it's those practices are based upon what non-Jews were doing in the area. So like how a synagogue is built, the architectural style of a synagogue. I mean, there's nothing halachic about that, but we're influenced by the culture that we live in. So synagogues in Arab countries are going to look different than synagogues in Europe or in America.
The food too.
Right, and exactly right. The food too. So like for Passover, charoset, for the Seder, is just has to be something sticky. There's no halacha around that. So it all depends on where you live and what's available there for this recipe. So, but those are non-halachic things. So there are different. Artwork in the synagogue. Is it appropriate to have artwork in the synagogue or not? Because the Ten Commandments says, don't have any graven images before me, God says. So why is artwork allowed in a synagogue? So it depends also where in the world you're from, and ancient synagogues that are discovered in Israel that are 1,800 years old have artwork on the floor, the beautiful mosaic tiles, and humans, animals, the zodiac, lots of things like that. So we're influenced by the society in which we live and the culture, what cultural norms are. And so will it extend to bestiality? Well, the rabbis are hoping no. Here, this is another this is an opportunity for the rabbis to talk about non-Jews and disparage them in the process. Okay. Let's go on. So, due to slight forfeit of potential, the Gemara counters. So too, let us say, due to the slight pleasure of with a Gentile will not forfeit a great deal of money, which he can otherwise obtain by selling the heifer. The Gemara responds there, with regard to bestiality, his inclination overcomes him, and he is apt to engage in bestiality with the heifer, despite the fact that he knows it's to his disadvantage to do so. So there's just this inclination that, I just want to say about this inclination. A lot of the evil inclination, for much of it, most good people in the world are able to keep their evil inclination down. But we know whether it's addiction and therefore it's a disease, or something not quite addiction, we are often tempted by a variety of things. So whether it's gambling, whether it's alcohol, whether other choices that we make, decisions that we have to make, and whether we lie about those decisions or the excuses we make in order to justify in our minds that it's okay to make this particular decision, whatever it is, it's a moral choice that we're making. Somehow the evil inclination has some kind of influence over us, and it's our goal as moral and ethical and religious people to understand that there is an evil inclination in all of us, and that we need to work hard to overcome it. So there's a note here on the side about his inclination overcomes him. Some commentaries explain that according to Rabbi Padat, a Gentile is not concerned about the loss of money at all, as he's overpowered by his inclination. Others contend that Rabbi Padat agrees that in general, the Gentile is concerned about the money and consequently refrains from engaging in bestiality with the animal to avoid the possibility that it will become barren. Nevertheless, in this case, due to its great value, he is certain that Jews will want to buy the heifer, and therefore he assumes that he will be able to hide any evidence of his actions and has no inhibitions about following his inclination. Right? So he can lie about it. The Gentile can lie about it and say, no, no, everything, it's a pure animal. Nothing has been done to it. Okay. So the discussion continues. The Gemara suggests, and perhaps everyone agrees, that we are not concerned that a person might have engaged in bestiality with the animal. And here, this is the reason of Rabbi Eliezer, in accordance with that which Shelah taught. As Shelah taught in a Baraita, what is the reason of Rabbi Eliezer? The verse states, "Speak unto the children of Israel that they take to you a red heifer." This teaches that the children of Israel take the red heifer, but Gentiles do not take the red heifer. Meaning, I think that you're only supposed to buy a red heifer from a Jew. A Jew is only supposed to buy from another Jew. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. But the rabbi says, no, we don't have to limit our sales and our business to just with Jews. And that's from chapter 1, a whole discussion about that, whether it's better just to restrict all of our business with just to the Jewish community, make it a lot easier, and no worries at all. And the rabbi saying, that's not realistic. You can't do that. And I always hark back to, there used to be this throwaway magazine that would be available in the Jewish stores here called Who, What, Where. And it's all about Jewish life in Baltimore. And there are businesses that advertise there as Jews who are Shomer Shabbos insurance salesman, Shomer Shabbos window salesman, Shomer Shabbos mechanics. And for certain people, for certain members of the Orthodox community, they would agree with Rabbi Eliezer. The best person to trust is a Jew. And the Jew to trust is a fellow Orthodox Jew. And we're going to limit our business to only Jewish stores and Jewish. So just go to a Jewish doctor, just go to a Jewish lawyer, just go to Jewish businesses. So in certain neighborhoods, you can do that. And in Pikesville, it's most likely you can take care of all your business needs within the Orthodox Jewish community. But that's rare. You can't do that around here. You can do it in Muncie, New York, I guess. And certainly you can do it in Israel. But that's why for the kosher stores, the kosher certification requires that the owner of the kosher store be Orthodox, because the Orthodox can only trust a fellow Orthodox Jew. So in other words, if I owned a kosher store, I wouldn't get kosher certification because I'm not considered to be Orthodox. And I wouldn't be trusted enough by the Orthodox community to buy food from me.
That's not the case in Israel, because there are lots of restaurants that I believe are probably owned by Jews.
Yes.
They have kosher certification, but they're not Orthodox.
Right. So restaurant is
Or even stores.
the restaurant is different from the kosher store itself,
Okay.
because the kosher store is handling the meat that comes in.
Right.
The restaurant is already buying that meat from
You think
someplace
it's
else.
the-
So over all kosher restaurants,
Right.
the preference is also for the restaurant to be owned by a Jew, an Orthodox. That would be the preference, but it's not required.
Right.
So there are kosher restaurants around here that have certification that even they're owned by non-Jews.
Mm.
So there's like vegan or vegetarian restaurants that have kosher certification
Right.
to them, and there used to be a kosher. There was a kosher veggie Chinese restaurant, the Vegetable Garden. I think had
down the road.
before it was in Leisure World, it was on Rockville Pike.
Oh,
I
that
think
was
that
kosher.
had, I think it had kosher certification.
There's one in Tacoma Park.
Oh yeah?
What's his name? 16th Street.
Oh, Hertzfeld.
Hertzfeld.
That
He's got
they
his
certify.
stuff.
Right. Yes.
I
So
thought,
go ahead, Bess.
well, I thought the vegetable garden in Rockville was denied certification because it had a statue of a Buddha.
Oh yeah, the Buddha in front of it. Yeah, but that's right. So it gets
And
to
then closed, though.
yeah, so it gets to the whole dispute within the Orthodox community when you're trusting non-Jews, and because it has a Buddha, does that disqualify it from being the people being trustworthy enough? Anyway, okay. So this argument from Shayla is about suggesting that Eliezer says to restrict business and buying animals, in this case, just from Jews, and the rabbis who are more lenient. Okay, so the Gemara answers, it should not enter your mind to say so, as the latter clause of that same Baraita teaches, and similarly, Rabbi Eliezer would disqualify an animal purchased from a Gentile in case of all offerings. The Gemara elaborates, and if it should enter your mind that Rabbi Eliezer's reason is in accordance with that which Shayla taught, granted, in the case of the red heifer, a term of taking is written, but is a term taking written with regard to all other offerings. Since a term of taking does not appear in the context of other offerings, this cannot be Rabbi Eliezer's reason. In other words, for the buying of the red heifer, speak unto the children of Israel that they take to you a red heifer. So it's the specific language of taking means that should be restricted to Jewish taking, whereas other animals for other sacrifices does not have the word taking, and maybe Eliezer would say it's okay in those cases to buy from a non-Jew. Since the term of taking does not appear in the context of other offerings, this cannot be Rabbi Eliezer's reasoning. The Gemara suggests, and perhaps the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Eliezer only with regard to the red heifer, as its price is exorbitant. And the rabbis maintain that the Gentile would not risk forfeiting the profit for a temporary benefit. But with regard to the rest of the offerings, which are not exceptionally valuable, they concede to Rabbi Eliezer that animals purchased from Gentiles may not be used for these offerings. So, an animal for a regular offering, rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer agree, should only be purchased from Jews because they're cheaper, and a Gentile doesn't care about money lost because it's a cheap animal, and therefore he can do whatever he wants with it, and he can't trust a non-Jew then not to have done bestiality with it. But for a red heifer, which is more expensive, even a Gentile will be careful with it, and the rabbis say it's okay, but Eliezer says no. Okay, yes, Michael. Vayikhu. It's yeah, so it's the same thing. Vayikhu, it was the word in Numbers. The Gemara rejects this possibility, but what about that which is taught in the Tosefta? So that's a collection of these sources from the time of the Mishnah that didn't make it into the Mishnah, but it's a parallel source. What about that which is taught in the Tosefta cited earlier? One may purchase an animal from Gentiles for use as an offering. In accordance with whose opinion was this taught? It is not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, nor that of the rabbis. So in other words, if we had just said in this logical discussion that rabbis and Eliezer would agree that that an animal for a regular sacrifice can't be purchased from a Gentile because they're cheap and Gentiles wouldn't care about the money lost, then what do we do with that source that still stands that you can buy an animal from a Gentile for a sacrifice? Now we don't have a rabbi to put it with. And furthermore, it is explicitly taught in a Baraita. What did Rabbi Eliezer's colleagues respond to him with regard to his ruling that an animal purchased from Gentiles may not be used as an offering? They quoted a verse, all flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together unto you. The rams of Nevayot shall minister unto you. They shall come up with acceptance upon my altar. From Isaiah chapter 60. Since the rabbis learned from this verse that animals intended for use in all types of offerings may be purchased from Gentiles, there is no reason to assume that they concede to Rabbi Eliezer. Consequently, Rabbi Padat's opinion that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, while the Braita is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, remains uncontroverted. So we say then that we can trust Gentiles to buy animals from according to the rabbis, and Eliezer says no. Okay. So now we come to a red S, which means the topic is changing a little bit. The Gemara continues to discuss the halachot, the laws of the red heifer. Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis disagree only with regard to a case where there's merely a concern that a person engaged in bestiality with the animal. But in a situation where the Gentiles certainly engaged in bestiality with it, all agree that he has disqualified it as an offering. Okay? So if you think maybe Eliezer errs on the side of caution and says no way, and the rabbis say no reason to forfeit the sale based on hearsay. But if it's clear that the Gentile did do this, then everybody agrees, no, you can't buy that red heifer. The Gemara comments, learn from it that the red heifer is classified as consecrated for the altar, as if it were classified as consecrated for temple maintenance. Does the fact that a person engaged in bestiality with it serve to disqualify it? Items consecrated for the maintenance of the temple, which are not sacrificed upon the altar, are not rendered unfit by this act. So in other words, you're not sacrificing this animal on the altar, but you're using it for some other purpose within a temple, then it might be okay. The Gemara rejects this conclusion. Although it's classified as consecrated for temple maintenance, the purification offering of the red heifer is different, as the Merciful One labels it with the term for a sin offering. Accordingly, the red heifer is subject to the same laws as a sin offering, which means it's disqualified if it's the object of bestiality. The Gemara counters, if that is so, then the red heifer should be disqualified if it was born by cesarean section, as this is the halacha concerning all other sin offerings. I didn't know that farmers did that back then, that was a possibility to rip open the. Yeah, I don't know,
Maybe
but I
the
guess
mother
so.
cow didn't survive.
I guess not. The Gemara adds, and if you would say that indeed that is so, then why is it taught in a Baraita if one consecrated a red heifer, despite the fact that it was born by cesarean section, it is disqualified for use as a red heifer, and Rabbi Shimon deems the heifer fit for use in purification? If, as indicated by the verse, the halachot of a sin offering apply to the red heifer, how can Rabbi Shimon deem this animal fit? So there's still questions about this red heifer. So there's something about C-section that affects the status of an animal, also affects the status of a person. So a firstborn child, that is a boy, if it's born by C-section, first of all, so if it's born by C-section on Shabbat, the bris can be delayed to Sunday. So in other words, you don't have to violate Shabbat for a baby born on Shabbat. So if a baby's born on Shabbat 8 days later, counting the day of birth as the first day, the eighth day would be the following Shabbat. So you don't violate Shabbat for a bris for a C-section. You would delay it a day.
But you would violate it for a natural birth.
Natural birth, you violate Shabbat. Bris trumps Shabbos.
So if you want to get a moil, they will come to you on Shabbat.
So that's the other thing. So that's a good question. So if you happen to live in an area where a moel lives in walking distance to you, then yes, you can do but often a moel, that's not the case, because usually the moel is an Orthodox Jew, and the Orthodox Jew won't travel on Shabbat, so then that would be a reason to delay, because you don't have a moel there. But a bris also trumps Yom Kippur. You would do a bris on Yom Kippur, if a baby's born naturally.
If you lived in a very Orthodox community where they were available.
Absolutely, yes, because it's clear that you have to violate the laws of Yom Kippur and Shabbat to do the bris. Now, the other thing that C-section prevents, So firstborn boy. So a couple's child that is the firstborn child happens to be a boy. So if it's a girl and then a boy comes, it doesn't apply. Firstborn boy, you would do a pidyon haben, the redemption of the firstborn, because firstborn creatures belong to God. So firstborn animals are set aside as an offering. Firstborn human beings have to be redeemed from service in the temple. So, but it only applies, this doesn't apply to you, Eric, for Logan, because you're a Levi.
Right.
Anybody, a mother or father who is a Kohen or a Levi, their firstborn, they don't have to do the pidyon haben because you're already consecrated as a Kohen. So it's on the 30th day or any day after the 30th day of birth, you're supposed to redeem with a brief ceremony and 5 silver coins, right? It doesn't happen too often because it's either the mother or the father is a Kohen or a Levi, or also no C-section, and also the firstborn is a boy. So like I have 4 kids, and my firstborn is a girl. So no, you don't do a pidyon haben. And Logan was so that would, but it doesn't matter. You're a Levi. So yes, so already you didn't have to. So and also, so my son and daughter-in-law, my daughter-in-law is a Levi, but they had a girl anyway. Now my daughter and son-in-law, she's due the beginning of February. If it's natural birth, then potentially there's a pidyon haben that would happen because they are expecting a boy. So right, so actually. 5 silver coins.
Old silver dollars, not modern silver.
Yeah, because they have to be all silver. So Julian Liedman with his, he has it. He has them set aside. They have. He has a set from Israel of
so
5 coins.
Is
that right? So I know to call Julian if I need it. So yes,
I had to go buy coins. I didn't know Julian at the time. I had to go buy coins.
Yes, that's right. So again, it doesn't happen too often. At 30 years here at Sharei Tefillah, maybe it's happened 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yes, right.
I don't even know where do you do it?
Oh, and then they're donated to charity. Yes, yes.
You give them charity and then they take them.
Right.
We technically have given to the Moil.
Not the Moil, the Kohen. Yeah. You need a Kohen to do the ceremony because you're redeeming the child from temple service, and the Kohen represents temple service. So, yes. Anyway, okay. So, yes, go ahead.
We did a pidyon haben for our oldest grandson. Everything worked out fine. But so we're one of the 3. I didn't realize. But for our daughter-in-law, had a miscarriage before her firstborn son.
Right. So that's also right. Well, it depends how far along the pregnancy is for the miscarriage. So in other words, if the miscarriage happens within the first, some say that if the miscarriage happens within the first trimester, that it doesn't count as a full pregnancy, and therefore the next full term pregnancy that produces a child that happens to be a boy counts as a firstborn. So there is, I don't want to name names, but there's somebody in the community a while ago where she had a couple of miscarriages within the first month or so, and then carried baby to full term. We did a pidyon haben for him. Okay. Yeah. So because it's peter rechem, which is understood as the product of the womb. So, but it has to be. So all the laws surrounding the pregnancy, and with the C-section, you're cutting into the womb as opposed to the fetus exiting the womb in a natural way. Okay. So the Gemara, right. Okay, so the Gemara counters. If that's so, then the red heifer should be disqualified if it was born by C-section, and this is the halacha concerning all other sin offerings. The Gemara adds, and if you would say that indeed that is so, then why is it taught in a baraita if one consecrated a red heifer, despite the fact that it was born by C-section, it's disqualified for use as a red heifer, and Rabbi Shimon deems that the heifer fit for use in purification. If, as indicated by the verse, the halachot of a sin offering applied to the red heifer, how can Rabbi Shimon deem this animal fit? The Gemara adds, and if you would say that Rabbi Shimon conforms to his standard line of reasoning, as he says in another tractate, in Nida, a baby born by C-section is considered a full-fledged offspring and is no different from a baby born in a regular manner, that's difficult. But doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that Rabbi Shimon would concede with regard to sacrificial animals that an animal born by C-section is not consecrated? If so, even Rabbi Shimon should agree that the heifer is disqualified. So there's a question whether a baby born by C-section is considered a regular birth or not. The Gemara explains. Rather, and then we're going to have to end here because I'm expecting an appointment before 10:30, and I have to be sure that they get into the building. I didn't let the greeter know that I'm expecting somebody from Good Counsel High School to fulfill their world religion class project to interview me. So the Gemara explains, rather, the red heifer is different, since a blemish disqualifies it. A matter of licentiousness and a matter of idol worship also disqualify it. As it is written, neither from the hand of a foreigner shall you offer the bread of your God of any of these, because their corruption is in them, there is a blemish in them. That's from Leviticus. This verse indicates that corruption is considered a blemish, and the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught anywhere that the term corruption is stated, it's a reference to nothing other than a matter of licentiousness and idol worship. Let's just do one more paragraph because we're coming up to a red S. The Gemara supports this claim. Corruption is a reference to a matter of licentiousness, as it is written with regard to the generation of the flood, the time of Noah. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And corruption also is a reference to idol worship, as it is written, lest you deal corruptly and make you a graven image. And consequently, with regard to the red heifer also, since a blemish disqualifies it, a matter of licentiousness and idol worship likewise disqualify it.
Who the owner's idol worship, not the heifer's idol worship.
Right. Yeah, whether it was used for idol worship or the owner. No, I think it was used for idol worship. Yeah, definitely. Whether the owner used, it was about the animal itself being used for idol worship or being used for bestiality.
And licentiousness also is something besides bestiality.
Well, when it concerns human and animal, then licentiousness is, by definition, bestiality. There's no fondling as opposed to, it's not like going to first base as opposed to,
Okay.
right?
I know.
Okay. So, all right. So we'll stop here for today. We do have class next Sunday, and then we're off for 2 weeks. And if the mission to Israel is a go, then we're going to be off for 3 weeks, because January 7th will be that third week. And depending on when I fly, or when the group flies, that we won't have class then. But I'll let everybody know.
It'll be worth
it. Right. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Happy fun.
Have a good week.
Thank you.